talk to you about and present on PowerPoint slides, but a lot of the really important learning in this you know, two and a half hour event is going to take place in some small groups. And so I'm a college teacher, and I like being in the classroom. And I think sometimes people, you know, I have stuff to teach you. You have stuff to teach each other and to learn from each other. So we'll be going back and forth between, you know, this presentation and my voice and small groups. So let me just say, first of all, I am a social scientist, so I'm not a clinician. I'm a classroom teacher and a researcher. And a lot of what I'm going to talk to you about today came from a 2-year research project I did when I was embedded with a 10-person case management agency, actually a CSP, which I'm sure you all know what that is. CSPs are connected historically to a style of working with people with severe mental illness called ACT, which stands for Assertive Community Treatments, ACT. So, just in case you don't know this form of mental health services, ACT is a wraparound approach, okay, for people with severe mental illness. It's a case management approach. The goal is to provide social support, medication, connection to other services like housing or access to Medicaid and SSDI. The goal is to advocate for people with their landlords, and really to do everything possible, everything necessary to keep individuals with, you know, the lived experience of severe mental illness, keep them stable, keep them housed, keep them out of the hospital. So again, much of what I'm about to say today comes from my own experience, not as a clinician, but as a researcher in this kind of setting. I shadowed people, I attended staff meetings, I went out to visit clients in their homes, I interviewed case managers, a lot of case managers. I interviewed nurses, I interviewed psychiatrists, and that's so I wrote up an academic book, and today is my chance to share with you in a more, you know, maybe more reader-friendly way, more kind of applied way, practical way, the things that I found and the questions that I still have. So before we go on, can you please now use the chat function, which I know you all know how to use, by Bugs Bunny. Type into the chat room what is your role as in the mental health workforce. Just type in, are you a case manager? Are you a social worker? If you're a nurse, just type in nurse. Are you a psychiatrist? Are you an addictions counselor? Are you a peer specialist? I just want to see, yeah, yoga teacher, administrative assistant, care supervisor, care coordinator. Okay, so lots of different things. And of course, now that oh, here we go. Psychiatric crisis worker, case manager, ancillary provider, case manager, administrator, care manager, therapist, psychotherapist, nurse, recovery coach, certified peer support, great, psych crisis worker. Okay, these are all the important people. This is the workforce that keeps people alive and keeps people healthy. Representative Payee, right? Okay, thanks, and keep on coming if you would like. Great. Okay, now I have a sense of my audience. It's just the right audience. So this talk is about ethics in practice. And it's an ethics talk, right? But it's a different kind of ethics talk, because although I have a secondary appointment in the Bioethics Center at the Medical College, I'm not here to tell you what to do, frankly. This is an ethics talk, not about controlling and regulating what you do. But I want to look at the work, especially now of case managers, but I think it should be relevant for anybody working with this population. Why your work can raise difficult ethical questions. And then I want to use our time today to learn maybe a different way to think about those questions. Okay, so again, it's not going to be a list of do's and don'ts, because you can get that from a website or from a course, or a manual, or the Code of Ethics from the National Association of Social Work. Lots of places to learn do's and don'ts. We want to learn why your work is so hard and ways to make it more manageable. So to begin with, I think working in community-based mental health settings is actually very difficult. And let me read you a couple of quotes. I can make my computer work. There we go. So here's a quote. It takes 2 slides. Two of the most oppressed groups in mental health are clients and their case managers. Basically, now we're talking about case managers, they're the lowest paid, the lowest on the organizational hierarchy, and the least credentialed. And yet they have, if I can move this away, they have the most cases and the most ambitious goals established for their work. Case managers have to complete the most paperwork. They have to go to the same meetings as others, but they're the most supervised members of the organization. They have the least control over their jobs and the least influence over organizational or client matters. So it's tough to be a case manager. This is coming from a social work professor. And having spent 2 years on the job in a case management agency, I have a good sense of these difficulties. So why am I here today? Because I think the ethical issues that people face every day in this line of work actually make the line of work more difficult and more frustrating. Like, it's difficult enough, but if ethical issues kind of stymie you, and if they're not discussed, they can get covered over in the busyness of the workday. In the long run, these covered over and unexamined ethical issues can make people feel horrible about their job. They can cause burnout, and they can push the whole system away from the ideal of person-centered care, right? Because I mean, the work of the professions that I saw listed in the chat room, peer specialist, care manager, case manager, therapist. This is the front line. This is where the rubber hits the road. And if you start feeling horrible about your job, you might quit. And if more and more people quit, then agencies have to deal with high turnover, and that's bad for patient care, right? And of course, it's also in the current climate, it's very hard to hire good people, the kind of good people like you who are going to take time out of their day and show up for this kind of training. Burned out clinicians who just go through the motions, it's even worse. So if we don't take the time to figure out the ethical landscape, if I can use that phrase, that we're walking through every day, it's bad for the whole system. The whole system starts to collapse. So I believe in case management. I believe in the work of CSPs. I believe in the assertive community treatment model. These are, and ACT in particular is clearly one of the best models out there. But in mental health, even the best model depends on the self-understanding of the people who operate it. So ethics do matter, not just because you should follow the rules, about confidentiality and boundaries and all the rest, but also because you need to have a deeper understanding of the frustrations of this line of work, of how it can become, frankly, ethically kind of murky, right? The rules don't always give you the final answer. Understanding all that stuff, like we're beginning to this afternoon, will make you a more confident clinician and a more dedicated one. So, again, we'll talk about some standard ethical issues today: boundaries, confidentiality, equity, to some extent dual agency. This is the jargon, but we'll do it with a twist, with a kind of a different angle. So here are my goals. I want to look carefully at everyday ethics as they arise in typical cases faced by case managers working with people with severe mental illness. I want to develop some new ways to discuss these issues and maybe resolve them in order to minimize the frustration and futility and experienced futility in your line of work. And then kind of at a higher level, a somewhat more generalized level, what are the ethical danger zones that predictably arise in mental health care, mental health services? So those are my goals. Let's begin with the phrase everyday ethics. Here's a book I wrote, published 10 years ago already, called Everyday Ethics. And then this is You can buy it on Amazon if you're interested. And lots of used copies by now. And that's the again the experience I had, which pushed me to work through some of these issues that we're talking about. And here's the phrase everyday ethics. Let's talk about that phrase a little bit. And here's a slide with everyday ethics on the right-hand side and what I call textbook ethics on the left-hand side. So when you walk, you know, if you go to your, frankly, I think your standard like ethics and boundaries training, what you get is a left-hand side. You get a list of do's and don'ts, right? Don't give a gift, you know, don't begin a personal relationship with a client or patient. Do get consent and stuff that I'm sure you know already if you've been on the job, you know, even just a few years. So those are called normative ethics. In the sense, norm means like the things you should do. Let's say maybe here I'll use my little cursor. Let's stay on the left-hand side. Textbook ethics are usually written down, and you can, you know, open up another screen, go to Google, type in, you know, National Association of Social Work Ethics, press enter. You'll find it, right? It's written down, you know. Actually, it takes about 60 or 70 pages. Textbook ethics are generic, like they're at a pretty high level of generality, you know, because they're meant to apply to everybody's cases and everybody's contexts. And finally, everyday ethics, where's my cursor? There we go, are backed up by legal authority. You know, if you don't follow, sorry, textbook ethics. If you don't follow the textbook ethics, you or agency can get into some legal trouble. If you don't follow textbook ethics, you personally might run into, you know, get into a jam of some sort, a conflict with your boss and with the people who run your institution. So that's part of the life. That's part of, you know, everybody's profession has an ethical kind of a formal ethical kind of landscape that you got to, you know, negotiate. Well, let's look at the right-hand side, what we call everyday ethics. This, the jargon would be descriptive ethics, not what you should do. Okay, it's not necessarily telling you what you should do, but it's just saying, well, these are the ethical issues that come up. They come up in spoken, you know, interactions, reflections, very informal, right? They're not written down. Let's go through this list. They are forget that. They are tailored to the job. In other words, they're not a set of general principles that you can read in, you know, school and then apply kind of in a top-down fashion to any job you have the rest of your life. They're specific to, like, you know, your job. You know, in my particular agency with this particular kind of client, given this particular, you know, funding system, this is what gets me into trouble, you know, or this is what I feel is ethically troublesome. And then finally, they're backed up just by like personal experience and intuition. So just a quick example of everyday ethics. You have a call-away conversation between you and a coworker, right? You say, you know, something, I had a really bad morning. I was talking with a gentleman, one of our clients. I had just started to work with him. He's really objecting to our agency's policy. And you can fill in the blanks, like whatever policy, a rep payee-ship, or, you know, the fact that he has to sign paperwork to get services, or who knows what. I said to this guy, hey, listen, I'm just trying to do the right thing. And he got really upset with me. So I'm not feeling very good about my job right now. That's everyday ethics. And the coworker says, well, you know something, I dealt with a situation like that last year. Let me tell you how I handled it. That's everyday ethics, okay? In the hallway, it's very specific, something which you feel kind of in your gut. You know, you don't quite know, like, what is the right thing to do, or you're caught up in some sort of controversy. I'm sorry. And there it is. Pardon me, there's another set of things going on my computer. So here's a definition. Everyday ethics is reflections about right and wrong made in the middle of your ordinary workday. it's an aspect of your own moral experience, like your gut experience. Some people talk about this as, maybe the phrase moral injury, and we'll talk about moral distress in a second. Stuff that happens to you, it's not a matter of laws or codes of conduct. And finally, everyday ethics is expressed privately or one-on-one, like either privately after work with your spouse, or members of your work team. Maybe go to a bar after work and have a drink and say, oh man, can you believe, this difficulty I'm getting into? I just don't feel right about this and I don't know what to do. That's everyday ethics. Maybe an experience of uncertainty and anxiety about whether you made the right decision in a given case. Everyday ethics involves the experience of frustration and anger when you make a decision, a moral decision about how to handle something, but you're blocked from acting on it. And we'll talk about that in great detail. So that's the view of the waterfront about everyday ethics. Let me say once again, this talk this afternoon is not about normative ethics. I don't know how to solve a lot of problems that we'll be talking about. I can't tell you what you should and should not do, but we can discover together what kind of wisdom you already have and what kind of ethical decision-making looks like in real time. So that's my intro, sort of like a classroom sort of intro about the notion of everyday ethics. Let's now go one step deeper and talk about a moral dilemma. And then you don't have a handout. I'll do the handout on the screen. There are two types of ethical issues you run into in this line of work. Many lines of work, maybe. The first is a moral dilemma. A moral dilemma is when you actually don't know what to do, right? You're in a situation and there are moral principles, high-level principles that apply, but they support different courses of action, mutually inconsistent courses of action. In other words, if you follow one line, you'll go down one chute, basically, and you're going to contradict the moral principle supporting the other line. To make it clear, let's use a case study. And this is a case study from my own research. And let's see now. It's going to take 3 slides to go through, but just a little story. Of course, I've changed the names of everybody. I call this the tax rebate. It's a little story. So Jack Berger is a client in a case management agency. He's a middle-aged man with a long diagnosis of schizophrenia. Jack is the kind of guy who has to take antipsychotic medication, and he does, but it's not totally, these things often don't work perfectly. He continues to complain about hearing voices. He's tried transitional employment, but it's unsuccessful. He ends up with disputes with his boss. He lives with his brother in a basement apartment in a neighborhood well known for gang and drug activity. So he wants to move. And he would need $800 in cash to pay for 1 month's security, to pay for the security deposit and 1 month's rent. Now, over the past several years, Jack has struggled with cocaine. And a year ago, he began receiving a tax refund from the state. He received his tax refund from the state, and he blew all the money on a 3-day cocaine binge. By the time it ended, he had sold all of his furniture, and he was evicted. Actually, he had been living in a safer neighborhood. That's how he ended up living in a more distressed neighborhood. Now, the case management agency is the rep payee for Jack. It just received his state refund tax for $1,000. So his case manager, I call Tom. Tom says, here's the dilemma. Should I give him the check? He wants it. It's like a loaded gun. Do you hypermanage it down to the last nickel for him? And he will be asking for it because he knows he got it last year. And he'll saying, well, did he get my check yet? When can I get the check? It's a payee dilemma. Supposedly, these checks are made out to him. I mean, as you all know, entitlement monies are meant for the individual, and we're not supposed to manage it for him. But in Jack's case, I just don't know. So let's work through this case. We'll work it through together. What is the dilemma that Tom faces? No. Right. So here's just a quick and easy way of figuring out this kind of dilemma. On the left-hand side, I want to talk about what from Tom's point of view, what are the courses of possible action? So you would put under A, right? If you're trying to work this out, logically, well, I could either give him the check for $1,000, or I could withhold the check from him. Now, there are good reasons for either way. You could say, I can give him the check because, I'm sorry, let's start with, just to make it consistent. Let's start here. Let's say the first possible course of action is not to give him the check. Dole it out in, it's $1,000, dole it out, like in $25 a week. The motive would be to protect him, right? Because one of the mandates of the case management work in this case is to keep clients housed. And you know that giving him a state tax refund and a chunk of $1,000 may well lead to loss of housing. You could decide to give him the check, give him the money, and because he needs it for his security deposit for his new apartment. The motive there could be you want to help him work towards independence and reintegration, right? Here's someone who did have a previous history of independent housing. Maybe he could use the refund check to get that again. Finally, up here in the third column, what's the high level? And there actually is a textbook ethics principle here. If you say, I'm not going to give him the check because we need to protect him, the principle is beneficence, right? Or actually paternalism. And beneficence and paternalism here mean some of the same thing. Paternalism means, the origin of the word is to act like a father, to act like a benevolent parent, right? Pater means father. So I could say, well, there's a high level principle at this level here, which supports this action. If you decide to give him the money in one fell swoop, $1,000, you could say, well, the high level principle is autonomy, right? Every individual has the right to their own resources, to their own property. That $1,000 is his own property in a sense. I mean, it's something which it actually is his. You should give him the check, which makes sense because you want to support his independence. And in any case, he's an autonomous decision maker. He should get it. Okay, so here is the way to fill out, in a sense, this kind of like it's like a logic model, right? You can either do A or B. There are good reasons to do A, good reasons to do B, and doing either A or B fits with what a high level, these high level textbook ideas. Now, the point about a dilemma, though, is that if you do A, you're foreclosing B. If you do B, you're foreclosing A, right? You can't do both at once. So just imagine the situation with Tom. He doesn't know what is the best route forward. So at this point, I want to go to a breakout group. And hope Amy is there to help do this.
I am.
Great. Okay. Thanks, Amy. So in your breakout group, first, and I'll give people, actually, Amy, I think you will do this technically. I'll give people 10 minutes. And at the start, just go around the room and share your name and where you work for. Choose one person as a note taker. And I gave you an example about this guy, Jack Berger, and his case manager, Tom. You describe on your own and use real information. You can change the names if you're not from the same group. I mean, if you're not working for the same employer, change the details, the names, but describe a moral dilemma. In other words, describe a situation where there. So I'm going to move this. There we go. Describe a situation where there are two possible things that you could do. Describe why each one was potentially convincing, just like we did with Jack, right? Why would it make sense to do this on one way, and why would it make sense to do that in the other way? And if you can, connect each action to a textbook ethical norm. So I'm going to go back one slide, if I can. Oops. Yeah, so choose a case and work it through somewhat in this fashion, right? What were the two possible courses of action? Can we do this for each client? Yeah, do this for anybody. Just change their names. Yeah. Two possible courses of action. What would be what were the ways in which each course could be justified? And if you can think of like a higher level principle, jot that down as well. Okay, Amy, work your magic. Please put everybody in groups of 7 or 8 and take 10 minutes, and then I'll see you on the other end. And if as you're doing this, you have a question, just throw your question up in the chat and I'll try to answer it.
Is this the breakout room, or I got kicked out and had to rejoin?
It is. I'm here. I'm trying not to turn my mic on because my dogs are going nuts because my husband's coming home from work, but that will only last a couple of minutes. Hi, everybody. It looks like we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 folks in here. And our assignment is, and we have 10 minutes, so we're going to return at 1:45. And hi, Mary, are you in this group too?
Yes, I am.
Yay. Okay, let Paul know that we are grouped up, and then you guys can start talking if you'd like. Has anybody involved with an ethical situation that happened with them that they want to discuss?
I have an example if no one else does.
Yay. Is that Becky?
It's Becky.
Hi,
Becky.
I
I have my camera off because I'm homesick today, but you
can
see my face anyway for a moment.
You're a good-looking sick person.
So,
it's Karen.
What was that?
I was saying hi. It's Karen Chappelle said hi to you.
Oh, Karen, hi.
Hi, Becky.
Nice to hear your voice.
Thank you.
So here's my dilemma. I help facilitate a social support group for autistic adults. And we had a recent situation where there was a lot of, I'll call it drama happening outside of the group between a couple of the members. And they were coming to the group, but then leaving within like a few minutes afterward to go out into the community to do whatever they wanted to do, while they're, in some cases, legal guardians believed that they were in this group. And recently, one of the guardians came in to pick up the participant from the group. The participant wasn't there, and we didn't know where they had gone. And so fast forward, we find out now there's like police involvement between some of these group members outside of the group, but we're worried about how it's going to affect the dynamics of the group the next time they come. Are they going to leave early? And right now the rules of the group are such that like we don't tell people when they can and can't leave. They can come and go as they like. They're adults. But at the same time, knowing that at least one of them has a legal guardian who believes that they're in this group and they're not actually attending, we're kind of like, what is our responsibility here? Do we let this guardian know that this participant has been leaving and going out into the community? Or do we respect their autonomy and their, the fact that they're an adult and they're not technically breaking the rules? So I don't know if that gives you enough context, but that's kind of where we're at. We don't want to kick anyone out of the group, and we don't really have cause to because nobody's broken the rules. But at the same time, there's a safety concern. Oh, hi, Courtney. Just noticed you're here. Nice to see you.
I came back in, my mic wasn't working, so I had to go. Yeah, but I'm here. And I did not hear the dilemma. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's okay. Yeah. So basically what I was sharing was I facilitate a group for adults. Some of the group members have legal guardians. Some of them are their own guardians. Some of them have been coming to the group meetings, which are 2 hours long, showing up for 5 minutes, then leaving and going out into the community and not participating in the group. We don't know where they're going or what they're up to. And recently one of the guardians came to pick up one of the group members at the end of the group, but they weren't there. They had left and not come back. And we weren't sure what our responsibility was as far as what we communicate with them. And now on top of it, these group members who've been leaving, we've been getting reports that there's police interactions and things happening outside of the actual group, but we're worried about the spillover, like how that's going to impact the group. So we're in a dilemma about, do we approach the guardian of at least one of the members to talk about what's going on, or do we trust that like they're going to handle it outside of our support group? Because technically, as I shared, nobody's broken a rule. So go ahead.
Yeah, I'm sorry. That's just tough because, like you said, they are 18 years of age. They are considered an adult, but at the same time, it's a safety concern being out in the community. I don't know. Maybe there's a way that you could talk to the guardian about it and not be like name specific about what's going on, but just letting them know maybe there are certain individuals who have been leaving the group and going out into the community during the group time, but not being specific as to whom. I don't know. That's tough.
Yeah.
I apologize,
agree,
you guys.
notifying the guardian. Sorry.
I didn't mean to. I apologize. I'm just handling some technical things from the background. So I apologize. I'm here, but I'm only half here.
I guess my question is, did they sign any sort of documentation when they came into the group about rules and what did it say?
That's such a great question, because we've actually just been discussing whether we should now have group members sign an agreement when they come in, saying that they understand and agree to the rules, because no, we don't have anything like that right now.
Okay.
Do you think if you do have that agreement and have them sign that, that will kind of deter them from coming to the group, though?
Yeah, that is another consideration. Most of the people involved in this scenario have been attending for a long time. Some of them for like, this group has been ongoing for like 15 years. So, but some of them are newer members, and I do think that there's a chance that they'll feel singled out by this change in practice, because they'll know that it was put in place because of their behavior. So yeah, that is a consideration.
I'm not suggesting that you do that. I was just asking a question.
Oh yeah, someone else had asked
Yeah.
about whether I was worried that someone would leave the
Right.
group.
Yeah, I got that.
Yeah.
Yeah, I got
Yeah.
that after. Yeah.
Yeah. So yeah, and just to reiterate, no actual rule that we have in place currently has been broken. It's more of we haven't needed a rule before about people coming and going during our group sessions. Usually in the past, people show up and they stay for the 2 hours and then they get picked up at the end, and it's not been an issue. So new territory.
When the guardian came to pick up the member and they weren't there, how did that go down?
It was pretty smooth. We said that they had left with some of the other group members earlier. We thought that they may have gone out to get something to eat because they had talked about wanting to go to Culver's before they left. And so the guardian said, oh, I'll just call their cell phone and see where they're at, and left and didn't come back. So we didn't hear back whether they found the member. They did obviously find the member. Well, not obviously, but they did find the member. And they made it home okay, but it was just, we were in a sticky situation. I love these questions. And I'm not looking for a solution. I'm just offering this up for discussion.
Yeah.
I guess I think about individuals' autonomy, and they do have. So they do have guardian. So a couple have guardians. So that's a different story. Wow.
1
I guess
minute
I
left,
picked a
guys.
good one for a dilemma.
You really did.
Yeah, that's tough, because Becky, is the concern like the liability that it poses for you guys in the 2 hours they're not there?
That's part of it. And also just now knowing that there's been some police in contact between the participants who are the ones that have been leaving. I'm like, what are they up to when they're leaving the group? And it's not like my responsibility to keep them safe when they're not with us.
Yeah.
But at the same time, like, the people that their caregivers believe that they're with us. So
Yeah.
We're heading back, guys.
okay.
Just FYI.
Thanks for the discussion, everyone.
It's good to see all your faces. I got a group I'm familiar with. Okay, let's see if this works.
Oh, hi, Matt Newbauer. I didn't know you were part of this. How you doing?
Well, I'm doing well.
Good to see you, even on a screen.
Good to see you, Paul.
I like your glasses.
They're my reading glasses.
Ah. Okay. Okay, so
Hey,
now let me.
Amy,
Oh.
I'm trying to send you a personal message, but it won't let me send you a message.
Okay, Jay, is that you talking to me?
Yes, ma'am.
Are you trying to get back into the meeting?
No. I was trying to see. Well, I have to leave at 3. I have a dentist appointment, so I know you guys give out the certificate at the end.
Oh, Jay, go ahead and email me.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah, you bet.
Well,
Okay.
this is Bill Morris. I was in a different group, and all of a sudden I was in the middle of a sentence actually, and got dropped from that group and showed up here with you guys. So
Yeah, you're back at the main group, so you're
Oh,
right
okay.
at the right place.
Oh, okay.
Okay. Why don't we get started? Because I want to move on. So I think that worked pretty well. Inevitably, some technological glitches, but hopefully you all get the sense of a moral dilemma. And actually, I was I don't know how this happened, but I was able to eavesdrop on one group. So I'll just summarize just in really broad terms. One group was talking about, I think it's room number 12, issues about transporting somebody to an appointment, and the sort of the close-in dilemma. Should we use a company car? Should I use my personal vehicle? Should I say I'm not going to transport the person? And there are all sorts of good reasons, frankly, feasible reasons, and depending on the person, to do that. You can decide to use a company car because liability issues, and you could decide to give transportation because you want to protect the client from harm, because public transportation is not necessarily so safe. You might want to give transportation to address the injustice of people being poor and living in a city like Milwaukee, where not enough money is devoted to good, safe public transportation. You may want to not transport the clients because you want to make people as independent as possible. The ethical issue there would be autonomy and people's ability to self-rule, to be independent, not dependent. Lots of issues that make it indeed a dilemma. Like you don't know quite which way to go when the question comes up. Now, let's move on, because there is something else, another kind of everyday ethics, frankly, which is called, right, I'm sorry, to finish off. So here's a moral dilemma. Many courses of action can be justified. Doing one precludes doing the other, and you actually don't know how to proceed. Well, here's another category, which is in some ways what I really hope to talk about a lot: moral distress. Now, moral distress, here's a definition from, actually the most famous definition from a long time ago. Moral distress arises when you know the right thing to do, but institutional constraints make it nearly impossible to pursue what you know to be. Oh, you can't see the PowerPoint. Somebody can't see the, Amy, can you help out here?
Yep.
Okay.
You just need to reshare it again, Paul. So you'll push the little share button again.
Okay, hold on.
I didn't know that you wanted to share your PowerPoint right now. So, okay,
Oh,
I'm glad somebody said something.
Okay, hold on. All right, share content. Can you see it now?
Nope.
Okay, I'm sorry, I'm doing something wrong.
So just remember that when you go into the share and it says share content, you can, let me even just see. I can share it too, but then it makes it difficult to do the rooms.
Thing. I don't know. Hold on. Okay, wait. It says share content, presenter mode.
Yeah. So now you're sharing your screen.
Okay. Where is?
I see it coming, Paul.
You see it coming. I
Yep.
don't.
So what I see is your email right now. And so just minimize your email. There you go.
Okay.
Perfect.
Thanks for my clumsy tech skills. All right. So here's
We're used to it.
So moral distress, here's a definition. It arises when you know the right thing to do, but institutional constraints make it impossible to pursue the right course of action. Unlike a dilemma, here's the big point. In a dilemma, you actually don't know what to do, right? You can go this way, you can go that way. Give the person a ride in your car, call, one of these transport services, force the person to take a bus. You just don't know. A moral distress situation is when you do know what to do, but you can't do it. You're blocked, okay? Here's a quick and dirty case study. As fresh as today's headlines, not for mental health, but just to give you a sense of what I'm talking about. Now, and moral distress is the case of the pro-choice physician. Now, we know that abortion was made illegal in Wisconsin after the U.S. Supreme Court overturned Roe v. Wade in June of 22. This situation sets up a possibility of moral distress for pro-choice physicians. So, for the moment, let's put to one side your own personal issues on the pro-choice versus pro-life debate. Just concentrate on the question, what is moral distress and how does it show up in clinical practice? Here's a case. A pro-choice physician is working in a Catholic hospital in a state where abortion is now illegal. So the physician is pro-choice. She greets a new patient, a 21-year-old female pregnant in her first trimester who requests an abortion. Now, this physician is convinced that referring the patient to an abortion provider out of state is the right thing to do, but state law and hospital rules prevent her from making the referral. So I would call this a case of moral distress. It's not a moral dilemma. The physician is not, perplexed about which, path to follow. In fact, she knows what path she should follow. Just the problem is she can't follow it. Okay. So when you have a case of moral distress, here are some steps to understand it, just to make sense of it. You first ask yourself, well, what is the preferred course of action? Just add some clarity to the situation, and to some extent, turn down the volume or turn down the heat on all the sort of passionate issues that are involved. What is their preferred course of action? Why would they want to do that? What are the personal motives driving it? What are the obstacles to carrying out their preferred action? And are there any possible compromises? Okay. And the point is, there's, and the bottom point is actually a really important one. Are there ways to compromise between what she wants to do and what the workplace demands that she do? Okay, so that's just a kind of like a baby case to, no pun intended, to discuss moral distress. And I want to go through another case coming from my own research about moral distress in case management. And let's see if, here it is. So here's a case which I call fast food delivery. So I'm going to present the case, and then I'm going to ask, and then we're going to go into the breakout groups again, and I'd like you to analyze it. So here's the case, and this is a real case. Change names. Ben Taft is a 34-year-old man, a client of the case management agency, diagnosed with schizophrenia, and he is regularly taking his medications for 10 years. However, he now weighs 372 pounds, and because of that, as we all know, has a number of significant physical disabilities. Now, at a staff meeting, Nadia, a pseudonym, who is a case manager, wonders how to proceed. This is what she says in a staff meeting. Ben Taft will be immobile when he hits 400 pounds. He has to sit and recuperate, even after a short walk. He complains to me, I can't walk too much. My hips hurt because of when I was homeless. But the reality is, I'm not going to be able to get him to exercise or to eat better. Where he lives like in a room and board house, all they do is sit and eat. He sleeps 20 hours a day. That's not life, that's just existing. So the team discusses, it's a 8 a.m. staff meeting. The team discusses whether to change his current treatment plan, which now includes home visits 3 times a week with delivery of fast food lunches as an engagement tool. Nadia brings up her complaint about this, but the consulting psychiatrist, Dr. Young, says, listen, tell me when he hits 400. He's on Zyprexa, and that's the only medication he's ever stayed on. So the team decides, to try to reach some sort of consensus in the staff meeting, the team decides to leave the treatment plan unchanged. Now, after the staff meeting, I talked to Nadia, and one of these hallway conversations, and she says, oh man, we are failing miserably. We're still going to buy him the fast food and deliver it. We're deferring to Dr. Young. We're depending on him to come up with a solution to the obesity problem. But what we need to do is change our approach. Why does fast food have to be the engagement tool? We're not coming up with a plan. We joke about it and wait until he's 400 pounds, but we really shouldn't wait. That's medically and morally wrong. So there's the case. I'd like you to, and Amy, please help out here, to do another breakout group. And this is a case of moral distress, not moral dilemma. Nadia knows exactly what she wants to do. Well, she's sure that she doesn't want to carry on with the status quo, okay? So in your breakout group, take 10 minutes and figure out what is her preferred course of action, what is driving her preferred course of action, what obstacles is she facing, and are there any possible compromises that she could make and ways to move forward? Okay. So, as Amy breaks people up into groups, and again for 10 minutes, I'm going to go back. I'm going to continue to kind of cycle through these slides, so you can read the case again. And then I'll rest, after I cycle through the slides 1 or 2 times, come back to the breakout group slide. Okay, Amy, is this working?
Yes, so I'm gonna, same breakout sessions I think will happen. If you by chance go in and you do not have a breakout room, I think what happens is you just stay put here. And so it looks like you might be in good company. Maybe just have a discussion with the people that you're with, okay? So I think that's what's happening. So I'm gonna go ahead and give it a go here. So the rooms are starting to open. And then 10 minutes, Paul?
Yes.
Okay. Hi guys, can you see me or hear me?
Yes.
Hi, Lakeisha, how are you?
Good. How are you?
Good.
Good.
So let's see, it looks like it is at different groups this time, which is good. Because then we can work with different people. So it looks like we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. We have 8 in our group. What did you think of Paul's case study?
I actually had to step out. I had a client. I was dealing with a client, so I heard some of it. So if you could give like a brief
Sure.
overview.
You know, they were talking about a client that it was overweight and in a group home, and one of the incentives of visiting this client is that they bring fast food. And so, you know, they're waiting essentially for the patient to get to 400, and then it would be almost like a medical issue, and then they could refer to a drug when the case manager is trying to say, but wait, this is a moral, ethical issue because we're just waiting. We're not really, you know, creating a treatment plan that is healthy, right? This is just somebody gets an incentive that has fast food when we could be creating a treatment plan that has different incentives, possibly. So that's what I captured from it. Anybody else?
Thank you.
Does that help?
It does.
Is anybody else in here with us?
I see people, but everyone is probably, I don't know
Yeah.
what's going on.
I don't either. Well, I had a case similar to this when I did in-home therapy years and years ago. I had a teenager who was significantly overweight, and the dilemma that I had was that the only way he would talk to me is if I fed him fast food or got him a sub from Cousins. And you know, and I got called out on it by one of my other case managers. I worked on a 5-person treatment team.
Okay.
And she really kind of laid into me, and I said, look, I have to, my dilemma at the time was, or I had an obligation to get some information out of this kid to try to understand what the underlying issue was, right?
Mhm.
And so if it meant a sub or McDonald's or whatever it was, he did talk. He talked 2 different ways. He talked in the car and he talked while we were eating. And so I got a double whammy there, you know, with those sessions. And so
Okay.
that was something that I at the end of the day, what ended up happening was that I continued on doing what I was doing. And I'm sad to say that, you know, looking back, but I did get the information that I needed. And then what happened with this particular intensive treatment team was that there was a team of 5 of us. And so because I got his bit of the information within the family, when we all came back together to do group therapy, then I had his, and I was able then to help solve the family issues. You know what I mean? I'm not quite sure whatever happened with his weight, but I know that that did help, and that's horrible to say. So I guess my question would be, you know, with this particular case study, I'm wondering if that McDonald's or whatever it is, that fast food is also building that secondary you know what I mean?
Mhm.
That grab like I got.
Mhm.
But at the same time, I also wonder too, okay, they want fast food, but now more and more fast food places are having healthier options. So yeah, you know, we are going to McDonald's, but hey, why don't you order this or that instead? We have a client here at my agency. He's not an adult, he's a kid, but he will only work on his goals and work with the provider if she gets him Taco Bell. And that's the only way that he'll listen and do anything. He wants Taco Bell. So one day, yeah, I had a conversation with them, and I just kind of made it as an incentive, like, hey, first you're going to work on your goals and do what you need to do with your provider, and then we'll get you some Taco Bell. Like, he's not obese or anything, nothing like this study, but, you know, maybe even finding just healthier options at a fast food restaurant.
Yeah, I like that. I mean, certainly if I could go back in time, I sure the heck would have done something differently, you know. I just remember making progress, and but that's a good, you know, making different options that way. But did you see that they took the salads off the McDonald's menu?
Yes, and I love their salads.
I did. Do you remember the shake 'em salads? Remember you like put your it was like in a cup almost. Anyway,
Mhm.
I digress. But yeah, I agree. That's a great solution or option. Anybody else have thoughts about the case study? I'm gonna just let Paul know. Oh, I'm wondering if Paul. I'm gonna let Paul know we're coming back at 2:10. So yeah, that's a hard one because, you know, if they want fast food, there aren't very many options. And, you know, if you're trying to get them to meet and do what they need to do and be part of their treatment plan. You know, and I guess maybe some other questions I would have is, you know, did anybody ask this consumer if there's other things that are incentives? You know, does he like to go for walks? Does he like to, you know, do anything other than fast food? Anything? Does he like to, you know, do crafts or, you know, Legos or, you know, even something like video games is better than eating fast food. So I'm wondering if another incentive might be part of the treatment plan too.
Mm-hmm.
I agree. Or I would even still using like the fast food, like if they're set on the fast food option, maybe like instead of every time we meet, every other time or once a month, or you know, kind of compromise a little bit better.
Yeah. Yep. Or even, you know, I think in the case study it said something about short walks. He's able to do short walks, maybe the short walk to the fast food place, you know.
Yep.
So that's hard. But I agree with the case manager, and I agreed with the case manager that I had years ago too. That kind of called me out on it.
Amy,
I was young.
I'm sorry, Amy, excuse me. We have
No,
some
go.
surveyors here, so I actually have to jump off
Okay, yeah,
to
go
meet
ahead.
with them really quick. So thank
No
you.
problem. We'll see you back in the big meeting. We're going back in about 1 minute, so yeah, we'll discuss. So
I was gonna get put back in my group because I was hooking up the camera and the microphone and I was tired of typing and then I got kicked out.
Oh, you got kicked out?
Yeah, because I was hooking up my camera and microphone. So
Oh, well, hopefully when we go back to the main group, you won't have any problems getting back. Like I said, we'll go back in another minute. But yeah, this is a good one. I like all these. This is one of my favorite ones, actually, this moral, ethical, moral, and dilemma. These ones, and just trying to decide what's the right thing to do, right? I'm going to start closing out the groups. We're going to come back here in about 20 seconds or so. I was surprised that we got new people in each group.
Amy, you kill me when they switch over.
Oh, really? What do you mean?
Because like on Zoom and stuff like that, it tells you you're like leaving the room.
Oh.
Where this one just switches you right away. Like all of a sudden you're on the screen.
Yep, mid-sentence. That's
You're
it.
on a completely virtual realm. Different, yeah.
Yeah, well, when you come back, it does give you a little bit of a notice. It tells you, you know, you got 10 more seconds.
That's it? It didn't do that
Yeah.
for us.
Oh, mine does not.
Ours
does not.
Mine did not either. Mine didn't either.
Were you not reading the little message at the top? There's a little message at the top.
Well, I'll try to.
No, we didn't get any sort of a message either.
We got a little message.
Well,
Mine
you guys are
said-
the special group.
Mine said 10
fancy.
seconds, but people started transitioning out of there before my 10 seconds was up.
Okay, I think we should come back to the large group now. Can everybody see my screen? The
Yes,
PowerPoint?
Paul.
Yes.
Yep,
Good.
looks great.
Right. Okay, so I want to just sum up something. Let's see now if I can. Right. Just to summarize a little bit what we've learned so far, and then I'll just keep on going after this. I was going to take a break at this point, but I think people can use the next breakout room to take a break if you need to. I'm just going to bomb through here. So what have we learned so far? We've learned the difference between moral dilemma and moral distress. Just to recap, dilemma when you actually don't know the right thing to do, because two principles contradict each other, like autonomy versus beneficence, to use the jargon. And these two principles support inconsistent courses of action. You do one, you're going to break the other, right? This up here. Moral distress is when you know the right thing to do, but institutional constraints make it impossible to act on your convictions. So if you remember nothing more from this training, please remember the difference between a dilemma and a distress. Actually, eavesdropping on one of the groups, I think people are doing a really good job, working through this issue. The issue, I should just go back a few slides here. When you're dealing with a case, of moral distress, the most important question in some ways, or the culminating question, is section D. How do you compromise? How do you move forward? It can be very difficult for people. I'll tell you the real background of that case about Ben Taft. I mean, in real life, it really, the case manager involved just was so upset. Was like, the case manager involved just like left the staffings when we talked about that case, just like, you could see the steam coming out of her ears, and she was so angry. And actually, that was one of the reasons why this person became, arguably like a little burnt out. What I heard when I was listening to I think group 12, is that one of the, people didn't say this directly, but one of the danger points of moral distress is when you get locked into a struggle over, your particular preferred form of moving forward, and essentially the system, the institution, the psychiatrist, the boss, whatever it is, the blockage to your particular preferred path. What was so interesting about the conversation, I think so wonderful about the conversation in that group, was people were saying, well, listen, what about moving Ben Taft to new housing where he can be encouraged to move a little bit more? What about doing motivational interviewing with the clients, right? What about figuring out what the client wants? And maybe the client actually himself is not too worried about his weight and the disabilities that make it hard for him to walk. So no, I don't know the real answer here. I mean, we don't have anywhere near the level of information to make like a clinically astute kind of solution, but we can just observe that opening up the conversation, opening up all the options, like get a 360-degree view, is one way of moving forward and not getting locked into, my preferred path and all the things that block it. So I just wanted to make that note. I thought it was a very lively and smart conversation. Well, moral distress has been researched, as people have tried to figure it out, because it's so common in many areas of healthcare, and it's not just a philosophical category. It's actually a bodily experience, and here's some of what people have talked about. It's a physical experience. If you are blocked in living out your ethical viewpoint, right, you might get insomnia and headaches, and people say, I sweat, I shake. The rest of the day is shot because I'm frustrated and angry. So, it becomes an embodied, visceral experience, right? Moral distress has psychological signs. You feel sometimes shame. You feel embarrassment. You often feel isolation, right? Kind of like 1 against 1,000 feeling. You feel guilty because you feel like you're being judged, wronged, and wanting to go this direction and that one, and not that one. You feel anguished, and also you have a perceived violation of the self Now, and I don't have time to go into this, but if anybody on this call knows the literature about moral injury, which is often, I think it began especially for people dealing with post-traumatic stress after combat. And that I think would be really one of the limiting cases, one of the most extreme cases of moral distress, where you're forced, your very job forces you to do things that violate the sense of morality you had before you signed up for the service. And it can be a very difficult experience, and it's perceived violation of what you take to be the most important part of yourself. So complicated and so difficult, and that's why a lot of people are trying to work on it. Moral distress has an effect on the work team, right? If a certain percentage, and I don't know what the percentage is, 10%, maybe 40% of people repeatedly are being blocked from carrying out their preferred ethical path, they will have low morale. They will become burned out. And obviously there will be, or maybe not so obviously, there will be rapid turnover, and rapid turnover means no continuity of care and a lower level of care. And FYI, the case management agency that was kind enough to let me join as a researcher experienced an almost 100% turnover in staff in a period of 2 years. Not because there was any clinical problems. I mean, these were very expert clinicians with, loads of experience and great sensitivity. But the way the system was set up, there was no place to talk about this kind of thing. That, in fact, that was one of the big shocks to me. It just shows you how naive I can be. One of the big shocks to me was that, I saw moral distress breaking out a lot, and rarely was there a kind of like neutral space, like a safe space for people to say, I just feel crappy about what I'm being forced to do here. So that's a kind of issue that can be solved, by reorganizing things a little bit. Now, let's talk more about moral distress. I think I do think that's like much more of a disruptive and problematic aspect of working in mental health services compared to moral dilemmas. What are the danger zones? In general, there are two causes of moral distress, and they're kind of related. But the first is workplace hierarchies, and every workplace has hierarchies, right? You're forced to do something that you don't like to do because someone above you says it's got to get done. And that can be a face-to-face thing, right? I mean, the psychiatrist is at one end of the table, and you, the case manager, are at the other end, and all the sort of power differentials are right there, in full display. Another cause is a conflict between program guidelines, which are kind of like less personal, and your commitment to clients. And to bring this study up to date, I'm going to talk about a case study from 2020, and this is not my own. I found this from the journal International Social Work. It's actually a case study from England, but social workers and the nature of practice and the nature of moral distress that came on in April 2020. Let's look at the case. Here it is. So during the first lockdown period of COVID-19 in April 2020, these are pseudonyms: Sheila Watkins, a mother of 2 young children, experienced a relapse of bipolar disorder and needed to be hospitalized. So she had a case manager who drove her and her 2 small children to the hospital because there was no one at home at the time to look over the kids. She decided the case manager decided to take a taxi, her own car, instead of a taxi, which was against the agency's rules. She said, I wanted to limit the number of people involved and to minimize the risk of exposure, and this risk of infection to Miss Watkins. Sorry for the typo. Now, during the trip, the case manager had a mask, with her, but decided not to wear it, and that also was against agency policy. She said, "I did this because the kids were already scared and confused. They shouldn't have a masked stranger take their mother away." After hospital admission, Linda, the case manager, drove the children back home and spent time with the kids indoors, cooking them lunch as they waited for their aunt to arrive. And Linda, the case manager, says, in an interview done afterwards, "I know this wasn't making things risky, right? I know that I was hanging out indoors with two children. I didn't know actually, this is way before vaccines. So I didn't know if they were ill or not. I don't know if I was, positive or not." Now, afterwards, she said, and this is in the interview by this person, Banks, afterwards she said that she felt anxious throughout the day, and she was indeed reprimanded by her supervisor. She said, "I'm used to assessing risk in others, but now I'm a potential risk myself. This makes me feel very uneasy." And she concluded, "But I was determined to make their talking about the children, I was determined to make their mother's hospital admission as easy as possible for the children because they will remember this day for a long time." So, again, fresh as today's headlines or headlines of 3 years ago, a case of moral distress. And now we're not going to do a breakout group because in the interest of time, because we only really have another hour. There's a lot more I want to go through. But you can imagine, on your own, right, working through this case. It has all the signs of moral distress, right? Her. No, this is her like a after the fact case because she already made her decisions. Okay, she just went right through and did what she thought was the right thing, which is to, bring the kids and the client in her own car, not wear a mask, not worry about keeping 6 feet of distance, hanging out, being indoors with the children to prepare them lunch. That was her preferred course of action, and she followed it. Now, her motives for doing what she did, I think are pretty clear. She knows that she's going against company policy. Well, that's the potential obstacles is number C. So, I mean, she knew that the obstacle was company policy. She just, how do you say, went for it anyway, right? The motives was that she was thinking about the best interests of the children, right? I mean, this is a tough day, a horrible day for them, and she needed to maintain some sort of, decent emotional contact to be able to reassure the children, and she decided that wearing a mask was not the way to go. Now I ask the final question, which you can talk about, tonight over dinner. Do you think that she did the right thing? Now, she clearly had to go against the workplace hierarchy. She was reprimanded by a supervisor. She had to go against the guidelines of her program, and she felt moral distress about it. She said that she felt anxious all day, right? And I don't think I said that she also said, I didn't include this in the slide, that she received no guidance or emotional support whatsoever from her coworkers on that day or afterwards. It was an individual, kind of a lonely decision to make, and she paid for it, right? I wonder whether people, well, maybe we can do this right here using the chat. We don't need to use small groups, but use the chat function. Do you agree with her decision to act contrary to policy? I'm just curious about people's reaction. And everyone, there's no right or wrong answer. But she suffered moral distress because of it. Do you think that was worth it? Why don't you type into the chat room and we can look at some of these answers. I'm not seeing any answers. Oh, here, yes. Okay, so one person says yes. Did anybody else say yes? And if so, why? I agree with her. Oh, let's see what's out here. It's not working. No. Besides COVID, there's liability and accident. Okay. Yes. Oops. Sorry, I just messed up here. There we go. The distress came after the fact. In the moment she did, it's not working. Seems to be person-centered. That's interesting. I wonder if she could have worn her mask indoors. Good. She could have been putting herself and other people in danger. Yes, because she wanted to maintain trust. Somebody says no, maybe there are other ways to accomplish the same task. You would have worn the mask? Good, yeah. She should have called a taxi. Yeah, okay, I think these are all feasible answers. I mean, the ethics are murky. Right. I would imagine the kiddos had masks at this time too. Yeah, well, you would hope, maybe not. And someone just says, follow company policy, okay? And that is one legitimate perspective. She could have provided the family with masks. During COVID, I did visit as needed, yeah. I mean, look, it was a very, very tough time, and we all have, you know, difficult memories about it. She should have spoken with her superiors, okay. You know, that's a good, we say you should have spoken with her superiors. I would agree with that. However, I also know that the nature of case management work is, you know, it's like out of office work. Sometimes the superiors just aren't there, which actually makes moral distress more likely when you're working in outpatient services than inpatient. Follow company policy, company protocol. So what everybody said is legit, for sure. And the only kind of, yeah, where's that ant? Yeah, the ant should have been more involved. The main point I want to make is simply that these cases, this kind of moral distress does come up, and it does not have a clear answer. I would only hope that in this case from England again, that like the only thing that's clear to me, put it this way, the only thing that's clear to me is they should have talked this out afterwards, and they should have had a weekly session, sort of kind of like a no judgment session, you know, kind of like a safe space, no judgment session. Do it half an hour every week on Friday afternoon. What is coming up nowadays with COVID and the decisions people are making? Air it out. I think the one big problem is when, again, as I said, when these things are bubbling up, there does not seem to be a right answer, and we saw that right here on our screen. You know, many people are going to have many different ideas. That needs to be, in my opinion, needs to be a topic of discussion. So thank you all for your comments. Let's move on. This issue about this case, lockdown decisions, touches on the question of boundaries. And Linda, the case manager here, clearly decided to really not follow company protocol, which is a protocol about boundaries. In this case, both kind of public health boundaries, like wear that mask, and also maybe emotional boundaries. I mean, the kids were not her clients, right? I mean, her client was the mom, and it's not in her, you know, scope of practice to make lunch for children. So there are a lot of boundaries that she broke. That's for sure. Let's talk about boundaries. And the nature of case management and you know, working with people, you know, when you become responsible for so much of their lives, is that the boundaries laid out for psychotherapists are not necessarily always appropriate. Let's go through this. Here's a statement from an ethics textbook about psychotherapists, and it says, the effective and ethical therapist would establish and maintain a boundary that, despite appearing artificial, eventually provides the emotional distance for the patient to develop an autonomous sense of self. So this is from a book actually co-authored by Laura Roberts, who is a psychiatrist who people have long memories. For a while was the head of psychiatry at the Medical College of Wisconsin. Clearly meant for office practice, right? This is a statement about boundaries meant for office-based middle-class psychotherapy. Now, Mona Wasso, who was a social worker in Madison for many years, wrote an article about the topic, and she said, listen, in any given 10 minutes, a professional in a community support program, like most of you on this call, may be expected to take a consumer out for coffee, which is friendship, at which time she or he will hand out the medication, which is professional. So where are the guidelines for this blurring of boundaries? I don't know where the guidelines are, and maybe it's probably something that's negotiated differently in each agency. The only point to make is these boundaries are, in fact, get much more blurry for your line of work than for office-based psychotherapy. And finally, boundaries for advocates. And here is an Indigenous rights activist from Australia a long time ago who said, if you've come here to help me, you're wasting your time. But if you've come here because your liberation is bound up with mine, then let us work together. Now we're moving far away from a kind of strict professional setting into more of an activist setting with this quote, right? But it does make the point that actually both quotes, this one, boundaries for case managers and boundaries for advocates, make the point that the boundaries for case management work, especially under the sign of social justice, it's not quite clear what those boundaries should be all the time. So think about these three quotes, right? The strict, on one extreme, there's very strict boundaries, for the sake of office-based psychotherapy and the client acquiring a stronger sense of self. And on the other extreme, a shared project of trying to live in a more just society that unites the professional and the service user with a sense of a shared destiny. Your liberation is bound up with mine. So on one extreme, I'll just go back here. On one extreme, we have the goal of autonomy and a self-authored life. On the other extreme, we have a collective goal, a kind of social progress that no one can make separately, right? But that demands a cooperation among equals and hence much lower boundaries. Now, I leave it to each of you to figure out your own ethics about boundaries. And I realize there are very important rules about this, and that would be another kind of talk entirely. But in a talk about moral distress and everyday ethics, there are different possibilities, and you'll have to, again, there are 170 people on this call apparently, and so there are going to be, to some extent, 170 different ways of working through these complicated issues. Relationships, and I'm speaking from the CSP model, relationships between case manager and clients are long-term. And these relationships ramify into many aspects of a client's social life, the vocational life. And it's my little story about somebody, the lockdown decision case study. This person who ended up making lunch for the kids, in their kitchen. So these relationships do sometimes blur the distinction between a casual friendship and a treatment relationship. So just to keep on this topic of boundaries, people will disagree about how to resolve cases such as the following. So should you go out to a movie on a free Saturday with someone who is lonely and isolated, knowing that an outing would be good for your client? Should you accept a flower vase given to you in appreciation from a client's difficult marital breakup, knowing that the giver, your client, has a problem with overspending? mean, either a yes or in ethical terms, or in terms of everyday ethics, everyday ethics, either decision is, potentially justifiable, right? There are good reasons to suggest going out to the movie or not, to accept the gift or to refuse it. And here we're in the realm of moral dilemmas, right? Just to loop back to the very start of this training. To some extent, there are moral dilemmas that get involved here. But we're also in the realm of moral distress. Someone says, no, no, no. There's always a possibility that a frontline case manager will make the decision in one direction, but the supervisor makes the decision in the other direction. So the frontline person will not be able to put their decision into action and will experience moral distress as a result. And this, I think, is a pretty common feature in sort of outpatient, community-based mental health services. So if you have, by the way, I'm not paying such close attention to the chat room stuff. If you have a strong opinion on this matter, please enter it into the chat, and I want to continue to talk about this stuff. So as you enter your question in the chat room, you can open up a good discussion. And if the chat room doesn't work, I will tell you my email address. You can just send it to me on email. My work email is my last name, Brodwin, at uwm.edu. So you can contact me either via chat or via my email. Okay. Now, another set of issues that comes up, so it says affirm no gifts policy. Yeah, okay. Yeah, I think for some reason I can't read. Yeah, it doesn't work. Oh, I see. Here we go. Here we go. Yeah, affirm no, strong boundaries, affirm no gifts policy. People can express gratitude in ways other than gifts. Yeah, I think that's a good compromise. I mean, I think that's a good way of going forward. Yeah, I'm just reading through. Right. Yeah, no, I think people are thinking about this in a good way, and actually, flexibility is key here. A thank you will do no gifts. We say a thank you will do no gifts. I would say, I mean, that makes sense to me, but some people have to be taught. There's a level of kind of like patient education here. As we know, another issue involved in this line of work is, as a case manager, you have a caseload of 10 or 15 or 30 or 40, whatever it is, depending on your agency or more. So you have a lot of experience in these relationships. Remember that the person you're working with, your client, has only one, I mean, depending on the person, they may not have that kind of experience, and one has to learn how to handle it. So there's lots of good ideas. Now, another yeah, and the cultural implications. Wow. I do want to take the time to read these because these are interesting. Yeah, cultural implications for clients giving a gift. Yeah, we're not talking about the fact that we live in a very complicated, diverse, multicultural society, and gift giving and gift taking mean different things. Gosh, I'm an anthropologist, so I that kind of thing is really important to me. Yeah, then Becky Ayton makes a very good point. If you don't communicate boundaries at the beginning of the relationship and then later on enforce them, there's going to be hurt feelings. That's a great pragmatic and psychologically wise point. Yeah. So there are ways around it, but it takes discussion. Yeah. Let's talk about some other cases. Again, a case of moral dilemma and moral distress. And these two cases have to do with a ethical principle, right? Which is often called equity. And equity means something very specific here. It means treating all clients the same. Like, you don't treat a client who's like, college educated better than a client with just a high school education or, 10th grade education. It's interesting. take a picture of the flowers. Yeah, that's nice. You don't treat a client who is has problems with personal hygiene, any worse than you treat a client who is taking a shower every day. I mean, we know that equity, treat clients without favoritism, is a very important ethical value. Well, that ethical value, though, leads to some difficult cases. And the first one, let's talk about the first one, malt liquor and bad livers. That one was actually fairly easy to solve. And then the case of moral distress, which I call petty cash, was actually much more difficult to solve. I'm looking at the time, by the way, it's about 2:45. I want to go through these two cases, and then that'll be it for the case presentations. And then at the tail end of this, I will talk about, sum up and talk about a way that moral distress issues can be handled better in Franklin staff meetings. Well, okay, so here's a case. Ken Underwood, again, a pseudonym. In his mid-60s, duly diagnosed, schizophrenia and substance use disorder. For several years, he has lived alone in his own apartment, but when he drinks heavily, he tends to neglect everything, neglects food shopping and preparation. He basically just eats whatever, does not eat enough. And 8 months ago, when he was using heavily, his weight dropped dangerously low. And the case management team decided to go grocery shopping for him and strictly monitor his alcohol and food intake. So here's a case where the guy's life is on the line. Now, Mary, his case manager, announces in a staff meeting, Ken wants more money. So he has a representative payship. The agency is acting as a rep payee. Ken wants more money per week, an extra $20. Now, this is a transcript from the staff meeting. Oh yeah, that buys a lot of cheap malt liquor. How much does he drink? Mary says, I don't know. I usually look at his trash and see the bottles, but now he started to take out the trash before I come. And someone says, well, we really can't monitor his drinking anymore, but if we put a lid on it, that is, really restrict his cash, so he only drinks 2 6-packs per week, it would be better. Now, the team decides in a staff meeting that Mary should refuse his request for more money. And the psychiatrist says, this is how you handle it. He's going to want the money, but here's what you say. Tell him, Ken, we've decided that you're drinking and we're going to keep it from escalating because we're afraid you're going to go back to the way you were, 8 months before. Now, in the staff meeting, Mary questions this decision. She said, now, wait a second. Don't we give Ed Zander, this other client, $5 a day, and we see him go right to the liquor store afterwards? Shouldn't we be treating all our clients the same, or should we treat them in a different way? And she clearly wants to treat all clients the same. Now here's Dr. Young's response. Ken had wasted away. He had, when he was really drinking heavily, acute alcoholic hepatitis. His liver function test was 1,000, which is like way off the charts, very dangerous. So we had to do something. But we know Ed's liver function is fine. So we have degrees of restriction. We can let some people get away with more, but the others, we have to help them stay healthier. So that's the case. And, pardon me. It's a case of a moral dilemma. And again, it's a rep payee case. So the two possible courses of action here, Mary kind of wants to give him, other money, and the team says, no, you can't give him the money. The policy will be to withhold his money. Mary says, no, we should be giving, we should give him his rep payee money because we want to treat all clients equally. And somewhere back there is a textbook principle of autonomy, and also social justice. Actually, right? Like are we treating them unequally because just like we don't like the guy. He caused trouble for us in the past, or we don't like people who drink so much. And try as we might in mental health services, there is still a stigma sometimes attached to people because of their addiction. Now, the other course of action, withhold the money, has the clear motive to protect him. We saw how bad it became last time. We got to keep that from happening again. And lying behind that personal motive are these textbook principles. We need to protect him. We need to be, in a sense, kind of like a benevolent father, and we know his medical status, right? So we have not just really an ethical backing for this. We have some hard facts, right? In other words, the psychiatrist says, and let's go back to that. We know something about these two people. We know how they're doing health-wise. We see the one person who takes their money and buys drink. For some reason, his body is able to handle it. We don't have to be worried. So it's an interesting case because, in a sense, what the doctor is doing here is exiting the realm of ethical debate. He says, hold on a second. Actually, there's a phrase people use. Good ethics need good facts. A phrase I learned when I was taking my bioethics course over at the medical college a few years ago. Good ethics start with good facts. So the doctor says, hey, there are some medical facts here, and on that basis, we can treat people differently. The principle of equity, treating everyone the same, is trumped by the principle of by our knowledge that medically they're different people. No, I'd like to hear from you, and we can use the chat for this because I think we have some time. Do you think that the team made the right decision? Again, the decision was Ken will not get any more money, even though this other guy gets more money and use it for drink. The team says, no, we're not going to give you more money, and this is why. Tell me in the chat room whether you think the team made the right decision. The team here led by the psychiatrist. Take a minute to think about it. Do you think that they made the right decision? Okay, harm reduction. So it sounds like I don't see KS, whatever your name is. It says, well, this is harm reduction, which obviously is tailored to each consumer. Keith, thank you, Keith. Okay, yeah. So Keith says, yeah, this is fine. This is harm reduction, which is by definition tailored differently for each consumer. As a payee, I agree with the decision. Okay. There's a propensity to indulge until it becomes life-threatening. Yeah, so Joya Mosley, if I'm saying that correctly, treating him similar to other patients is a risk. And so you're justified in not treating him the same as other people. Then Keisha says, well, it's his money, he should get it. Okay. Harm reduction is different for each client. Interesting, yeah. I think people are thinking really well about this. Equality and equity are different. Okay, so Jennifer Pyle is saying equity treats everyone, equality treats everyone equally regardless of starting point. Yeah, I totally get your point, Jennifer. And that's kind of like a political issue about these terms, equality and equity. The starting point, though, here is not class or race or anything else. The starting point is health. Individualized plan rather than equity, right? Although there's a semantic issue by the word equity, which I knew would come up. But the point is, treating people differently is justified, right? Case by case basis, as Aaron Brophy says. Interesting. Now, not everybody agrees. I mean, there is one person who said it's his money, right? And Kenyatta Yamel, I would give him more money, right? So I do not know what the answer is here, and we have a nice array of different possibilities of like different possible answers. What if you were a smoker? So Brian, yeah, interesting question. What if you were a smoker when it's also unhealthy? Yeah, it's interesting. Yeah, we could spend the next 3 hours figuring out equity and equality. To quote a professor, if the goal is to climb a tree, the fish will need different supports than the monkey. Interesting. And then Keisha, if I'm saying it correctly, Rembert, either way harm could come to him because without money from his repayee, he could start to panhandle, and that's also unhealthy. That is a tough one. That is a very good point. And it would take, well, I could only hope that this range of opinions could be presented in, a special one again, like, half hour, say anything you want kind of staff meeting, and it might end up with a vote, or it might end up with some other possible compromise. That's good. Let me go on. There's another interesting case. Let's see now. How do I do this? Right. Another interesting case I want to talk about. Well, but before I do, let me just, I'm going to say directly something which I've implied. There are a range of opinions here, and my suggestion is that when this happens in your particular agency, you consider working it through in the way that I'm doing it here. Not that this will give you the answer, with with no remainder, but this will organize people's thinking and organize the debate a little bit. It'll give some structure to the debate, so you figure out, okay, well, what really is at issue here? And sometimes complicated questions like this, complicated moral dilemmas like this, you can turn down the temperature of the room by laying it out in the way that I've done here. In any case, that's my hope. Here's another case. I think this is the last case of the day. Here's a case of moral distress, and it's going to take a few slides to work through this. Well, 3 slides. So a guy named Carl Luders was a client in the case management agency. He was admitted there 4 years ago after the sheriff conducted a sweep of homeless people in a public park. This fellow, Mr. Luders, this gentleman, is 51 years old, a long history of alcohol abuse, a lifetime drinker. He does not currently meet any DSM criteria for mental illness. So he came into the program in a particular way. He doesn't, he doesn't meet criteria. So therefore, because of his life, he does not receive Medicaid or Medicare. So this is fellow Tom again. Every month he has to apply to the county for food stamps, a housing allowance, and $100 in spending money. So it's a tough case. It's tough for a bunch of reasons. He's not really classified in the right way, in the typical way with the other case manager, with the other clients, and he doesn't have the same kind of entitlements. As meager as they are, he doesn't even have those. So Carl is not liked. Okay, he's a heavy drinker, and when he's intoxicated, he becomes hostile. He threatens the case managers. He's often evicted, but then refuses to sleep at shelters. So what does the team do for him? Provides home visits and anger management exercises. And in staff meetings, and I witnessed this, I saw that he wasn't liked. The team criticizes him. Oh, he's not on money because he doesn't have a mental illness. He's just an alcoholic. And no matter what we do, he's going to be angry and disengaged. And we're not really monitoring anything. That is, we're not monitoring any medications. So Carl asks his case manager, I want more petty cash because the agency has a little bit of petty cash on hand. And the case manager says, can I please have some petty cash to buy him some tobacco, which is one of his few pleasures in life, and some household items. So Tom argues that Carl deserves more money. And here's how he sees, like, what's the basic reason he's working with Carl? I want to engage with him because he's very isolated. I want to keep him happy. And if he had tobacco and money, he'd be happy for a week. In any case, he is malnourished and he's suicidal. So we're going to cut back services, like not give him things. He has equal rank as any other client. He deserves full treatment. So here we are back in the question of equity. He says, some clients are liked more than others. They get an outing, they get extra time. Other clients who aren't liked get nothing. But I can't bring that to the table and still be employed. It's a quandary with no answer. So this, I think, is a pretty clear case of moral distress. Now, Tom's preferred course of action is pretty clear. He wants to give Carl more money, and the money is coming out of that little petty cash fund. It's not a lot of money, but it's enough to buy the few things. Actually, he wanted tobacco, which you would get at one of those tobacco depots, the cheapest possible tobacco. He, in the middle of the week, sometimes runs out of toilet paper, toothpaste, just the basics of what Tom would say. I mean, to channel Tom here, the basics of a dignified life. Tom's personal motives for driving the preferred action, well, it says right here, he wants to treat people equally. He wants to keep Carl engaged. He thinks that Carl is suicidal, even though he does not meet DSM criteria for depression. Those are his motives. The obstacles are what we see in the second paragraph. The obstacles are he's just not liked. I can't give him what I think he needs. I can't give him what I can't do what I think is right. I can't follow my own ethical path because this guy is just not liked by the team. And you have then this, actually in this case, a third issue. If anybody's ever studied the literature on double binds, like the older psychiatric literature about what is a double bind, one of the parts of a double bind is you're not allowed to talk about it. Right, so here he sees these two. He's in moral distress, but he can't even bring that to the table. He's afraid that he'd be fired. I mean, if he threw a fit, basically, and really got angry in a staff meeting, he's afraid that he'd be fired. So those are the obstacles to his preferred action. Now it's a complicated case. Okay, first of all, you have the hierarchy. As it turns out, and I know the background to this, this case manager Tom only has a BA. He doesn't have an MSW, or he doesn't have a, he's not a licensed professional counselor, doesn't have an MA, not an LPC. So he's down there, in a sense, at the bottom of the hierarchy, and the psychiatrist, of course, is at the top. In this case, Tom does not really accept the clinical reasoning that, he doesn't have a mental illness, therefore we don't owe him very much, because Tom thinks he is suicidal. And there's another issue in this case. I'll talk about briefly. There's a conflict between Tom's role as a advocate for the patient, for the client, and the role of gatekeeper. And this issue comes up a lot, actually, if you read mental health services literature. Some people really do get caught up between their personal commitment to repair damaged lives and the demand that they kind of screen out individuals who don't technically meet criteria for services. And if anybody wants to read a great book on the topic, I'll recommend a book called Crossing the Border by Michael Rowe. And this is a study actually by a sociologist of homeless outreach workers and people who are funded by a very generous federal grant to give services to people who are homeless. But the first thing they have to do when they meet those people is say, they have to apply the technical criteria of homelessness, which change all the time. you know, like a certain number of days, you know, without shelter over the past month. And if the person doesn't meet those criteria, then the social worker cannot give the person a blanket or a sandwich, even though that night they're sleeping on the street. It's a very tough situation to be in, and that's a guaranteed, you know, ingredient, a guaranteed setup for moral distress. So, just another case to think about. But you know, we have some time here. Type into the chat room. What do you think about this case? If you were Tom, would you just keep on pushing and pushing and pushing for more petty cash? Do you think, on the other hand, do you think that the case management team is correct that, hey, this guy doesn't even have a psychiatric diagnosis and he's, you know, he's a time sink, we shouldn't help him? What do you think is the right way forward here? And do you think there's a compromise? Please tell me your thoughts in the chat room. Or are you so stymied by this case, you just don't know what to do, which is perfectly fine. Phrasing it in a way that the man deserves to have basic necessities without saying the client's name. That's interesting. So you can sort of like in a sense, anonymize the case and kind of prevent, I mean, keep your colleagues or the other social workers from saying, oh, we don't like him. Like, make the point at a higher level. Okay, compromise, shift him to another, I mean, like keep him on the caseload until they find another organization. That's a very good idea, right? Like think bigger. You know, there are other groups in town that could help this guy besides us. Buy him a bus ticket to a better location. That's interesting. Yeah, we all know even like Milwaukee County and Waukesha County are different places in terms of this stuff. Try to find an ally on the team. Yeah, so Pam Fleiter, hello Pam, good to interact with you. Yeah, that's often, that is often the case. If you try to, you know, fight the good fight as a, you know, one person against 1,000, it's going to be very frustrating. Yeah. No, those are all good points. And just coming back to one that Jamie Kepke, if I'm saying that right, is saying, you know, it's very adroit. It's almost like jujitsu, right? Like find some way of getting to where you want to get without raising other people's hackles, right? Because you know people don't like this guy, so don't even go there, but make kind of make your point at a higher level. Thank you. I'm happy I pronounced it correctly. Okay. Good. Okay. No, I think that's a good discussion. I think people brought out some really good points. Let me move on though, because we only have I want to leave like 5 or 10 minutes at the end for open questions. Let's see. Right. So just to return to moral distress, which is one of the key take-homes. You know the right thing to do, but institutional constraints make it impossible to do it. And another way of saying this is the discomfort, which is in your gut and it's emotional and cognitive when you're blocked from being the person you want to be or doing what you believe is right. It's an interesting point. Actually, that book by Pertillo is about bioethics for the health professions, not just for doctors, but for all the other important people in healthcare. And I want to talk about this quotation. Moral distress is what you feel when you're blocked from being the person you want to be. And so how does moral distress arise? Let me be try to be really organized here in my thinking. There are certain steps, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, that happen that create a situation of moral distress. The first is you define the situation as morally significant. In other words, this is not just a clinical issue, it's an ethical issue, right? Then you choose a plan of action to conform to your values, right? So, it's almost like an intellectual step. I choose to go this way and not that way, and then you start walking down that path. You pursue your chosen course of action. Let's talk about this before we move on. There's something about being a case manager. There's something about working in, outpatient, community-based mental health services that is a setup for moral distress. And here's a quotation from research done with case managers, I think in North Carolina. People do this, they're not doing it for the money, Lord knows, because you're not being paid very much. All the money in the world isn't enough to draw someone to the work here. People do it for love. Another person says, this is not just a job, it's a life work. It's a vision, it's a mission, it's a family. It's people that I feel responsible for, and I can't let them down. Most of the people who work here, who stay here, either adopt this mission or they leave. So to really understand moral distress and where it comes from, you got to go deep, right? It's not just the surface of the work and this or that staff meeting, it's your motives for entering the work to begin with. And let's talk about these motives. And some of them are great. You want to alleviate suffering. You want to transform people's lives. You have a personal gift or talent, and you want to go into a line of work that allows you, you figured out in high school or college or wherever, you're really good at this kind of job. Maybe there's some unavowed motives, like you've had a great mentor in social work school or nursing school who you want to follow. Some unavowed motives, unconscious maybe, would be personal issues, maybe your own childhood, set you up in such a way that you want to kind of work on those personal issues through your profession, which is true for everybody in the world, in my opinion. Maybe you want to give advice to people or control other people. That's also a motive, sometimes for entering this line of work. And the result of all this is what the literature calls the well-intentioned perspective. And this is characteristic of mental health services and actually human services in general. It's not necessarily characteristic for hedge fund managers or politicians, and we won't go there. But for the people in this call, including myself, this perspective is really crucial. Well, so this, now we're moving into the home stretch of the training. This preferred self-image, which we all have, is challenged by certain aspects of the case manager's role or the social worker's role. You have limitless responsibility. So as all these cases, as some of these cases showed, especially like the lockdown decision case, you end up involving yourself in many aspects of clients' lives. And you take responsibility really concretely, like a guardian or like a guardian ad litem. They take responsibility abstractly, or like they're kind of a couple of steps removed from the client. But you take responsibility, face to face, in the flesh, in their apartments. You are staying committed to clients no matter what. I know that the CSP system in Wisconsin, it's very difficult to discharge someone. At least it was when I was doing my research. And you're working with people who are going to express some dependency. That's true of it. It's true of me as a psychotherapy patient. I'm sure it's true of your clients in terms of their lives. Now, what's interesting about this limitless responsibility of all the people who are on this call, social workers, peer specialists, clinical coordinators, nurses, psychotherapists, is that it's different. It's actually way more responsible than, the responsibility is much larger than even what doctors have. And here's my favorite quote. This is from a book by Melvin Conner, who was a physician anthropologist. So he's talking about his residency training in psychiatry and talking about a case of someone who came in was with severe mental illness, but there's impossible to commit him because he wasn't dangerous to himself or others. So the psychiatrist says, okay, he comes to the ER, the psychiatrist says, well, you got to go. The young man is free to go. I watched him progress down the steps, going out to the hospital. And there's a statue of Galen. Galen was one of the founders of Greek medicine. And the statue, this is like a book, okay, so sort of literary writing. The statue seems to say, this is not medicine. This guy's life, this guy's suffering, this guy's, impossibility of his life is not my sphere of responsibility. So I watched the guy until he disappeared into the warm night. Now, the thing about your line of work is that there's no statute telling you that, okay? Doctors are actually in some ways protected from moral distress, partially because they have a lot of power, and but partially because they don't have the limitless responsibility that case managers and social workers working with the populations you're working with do have. So the preferred self-image is challenged by, in fact, relatively low authority in the world of other providers and doctors and hospitals and hospital boards and lawyers and all that. It's challenged by the contradiction between program mandates and what people say they need, like the case of Carl Luter's. Our program mandates say this guy does not have a severe mental illness, so we don't have to help him that much, but people say that they need something else. And one second. Also, in terms of what people say they need, the program mandate is often, a mandate from the program to the individual that is, take your medication. And individuals say, well, I'm not mentally ill, I don't need to take it. Or their lives are chaotic and taking medication once a day is not a priority. Or they spend time in jail and their meds are taken away from them or replaced by a formulary. So even following the program mandates is actually very, very difficult. So here we have what I call the perfect storm of moral distress. You have a preferred self-image as compassionate, the well-intentioned perspective. You have limitless responsibility. So there's no boundaries, and I don't mean boundaries in an ethical sense, but you're responsible for so many parts of their lives. There's a long-term relationship. They're not somebody coming into the emergency department for 1 hour and then leaving again. And most social workers and case managers in the larger scheme of things have relatively low authority. So how do you navigate it? And I want to talk about 3 slides, and I have this also on a handout, and maybe I can send this to Amy, and Amy can shoot out the handout to people after this talk is over. First of all, I would say that the first step is to decide if the problem you're dealing with is a moral dilemma or moral distress. Okay, when these issues come up, like all the cases we've talked about today, that's step number 1. What am I dealing with? Step number 2, if it's moral distress, how is it manifesting in me and my team? Am I feeling, the queasiness, the nausea, am I losing sleep over this? Is it affecting the team in a bad way? Are people getting burnt out? Are they resigning? Third, I would say, on a case-by-case basis, analyze the conflict, analyze the case in the ways that we're talking about here. What is the course of action that people want to take if it's a moral distress? What's the conflict in the case of a dilemma? Why do people want to take that action? Are there deeper personal and social determinants? In other words, like, is there a religious background? Is there a professional background? What else is happening that are pushing people to try to resolve the case in their preferred fashion? And I would say, if it's possible, when you're working through a case, pinpoint the core context, the core conflict rather. And here are a bunch of them that we've talked about today. In the case of moral dilemma, are there competing principles? Protect the client versus help people become more autonomous. Maybe they should be free to make their own mistakes. Or should they be protected from the bad results of making the wrong making the wrong decision? Is it a conflict between your own conscience and what the psychiatrist at the end of the table is telling you? Is it a conflict between the program guidelines and your commitment to clients? Is it a context between being an advocate versus being a gatekeeper? Simply putting words on these issues, right? Like putting this in words, articulating it, I think is a step towards resolving it or finding a good way to compromise. And that's what I mean in this slide. Make moral distress, especially moral distress, an open topic for discussion. I mean, I would say it's a chronic, inescapable aspect of working with people with persistent and severe mental illness in a largely unfair, unjust society like the one we're living in now. Make moral distress an open topic, and then find concrete ways to both honor the individual conscience and advocate for the client and stay inside, protocols and proper boundaries and scope of practice, even if the ways to honor your conscience and advocate are partial or deferred. Okay, in my 2 years of research and everything I've read and talked about since then, there often are concrete ways to compromise, even if you don't see them at the start of the conversation, and even if they have to be deferred. And avoid an all or nothing approach. And here's my final slide, my two favorite quotations. For every complex problem, there's an answer that is simple, elegant, and wrong. So moral complexity is part of all helping professions, and the answer is going to be as complex as the problem, and sometimes deferred and partial. And finally, don't let the perfect become the enemy of the good. And a good enough response to moral distress is usually possible. So on that note, it's 3:20. I want to leave 10 minutes here for general discussion and Q&A. So let me thank you for your attention, and please send any comments or suggestions to me or criticisms. There's my address. But we have 10 minutes, so let's just go back to this point. Do you think that I'll throw it out? Do any of you work in a setting where these sort of discussions right here, where these sort of open discussions are happening? Are you in a setting where you think they should be happening? Are you in a setting where people are getting burned out because individual conscience is not being honored? Or even if it's not where you're working now, have you been in such settings? And would you like to talk about what the problems were and how they could be solved? What do you say? Yeah, so Catherine Buckwalter Hughes, right. So you don't have to name your agency, although it's perfectly fine if you do. Yeah, so you're a TCM case manager, lots of stuff happening with Catherine, are there exactly why I burned out? Yeah. So I'd like to hear from Catherine or anybody else. Do you see ways to address these? Do you see opportunities to have an open discussion? So Erin Brophy, we do have this sort of discussion. That's interesting. internal team members or the entire department. Yeah, so Erin, so when you say regularly, you mean like once a week, once a month? Just
Is it
curious to
okay
see.
if I unmute? Is that easier?
Yeah, please do. Yeah.
So once a week at our department, we have or at our agency, we have an all departmental staffing meeting. So every single member of the outpatient staff, which is peer supports, therapists, case managers, and our vocational specialists, as well as our child and family, all of us meet to discuss like specific clients. We meet to discuss like specific events that are happening or specific worries that we have, but then also once a month for each client that's in our housing program, there is a team meeting that includes both the internal team members as well as any external team members that they might have, just so that everyone can have updates. We all also keep each other pretty in the loop. If something happens, like there's emails sent pretty regularly. The communication is really good because we believe that like the whole purpose of us as a team is to make sure that we are working as cohesively as possible to provide our client with exactly what they need. So we try to make sure that at every step of the way, we are client-centered and client-focused. So, you know, this morning was our staffing meeting actually, and we spent like 20 minutes discussing like one thing about one client before we were able to come to a conclusion that we thought would work the best for them and then move on. That doesn't happen every week, of course, but you know, sometimes it's like a quick fix and then move on, but we do make sure that we are regularly making sure that everything we do is client focused. And I honestly think that's really great because it makes sure that we always have them at the forefront.
That's great, thank you. But can you tell me, at this meeting, how many people come?
We right now from our agency, I think there's like 5 or 6 of us in here right now. They send out the invitation to anybody they think that it would be pertinent to. It just depends on like if people have client meetings or if they potentially have other trainings that they're in. But today I think I see like 6 of us in here.
Oh, no, but I guess I was saying, you said
for the meetings. So
Yeah.
the internal staffing meeting, oh God, I think it's like 25, 30 people, I think, because of like all the departments that come. And then the team meetings is usually only about like 5 or 6, just because it's only the individuals who work with that client directly. However, of course, if there's like court cases or CPS cases or drug treatment court or anything, that number can be a little bit bigger. Also, sometimes team meetings can be as small as like 3.
That's interesting. Okay, so that's great. So you're teaching me something about this, because I would guess, this is coming from the outside, since I'm not a clinician in the field, that the number of people is going to affect the kind of dynamics in the room. And I mean, in my own research, I saw some pretty problematic dynamics of people kind of ganging up on one individual who actually, in some of the cases that I talked about. And sometimes this stuff might work better in a one-on-one between case manager and a clinical supervisor. But the advantage of having a lot of people, like 25 to 30 people, which I think is a lot for this kind of discussion, is that over time people develop a kind of like a shared memory, like a shared history. So the kind of the problems that you first arrive as a new employee, you've never seen it before. You stick around 2 or 3 years with regular meetings of 25 to 30 people, you're going to say, oh yeah, I have seen that before. This doesn't need to lead me to like melt down and quit. There are ways of working this through. So I do see an advantage of having a lot of people. And it occurs, one thing which I experienced myself personally in my own research, I presented like an early version of this talk to the people in the case management agency I was working with, and somebody said to me, it was really interesting. They said, Paul, we are so busy putting out fires, in this agency. We're so busy, like just grappling with stuff to get it to an answer by 5 p.m. We don't even remember when we talked about a similar issue before. right? You know, we're just burnt out, and not burnt out in the sense of getting ready to quit, but you know, this is crisis management. And you that talk to me, you know, you, Paul, have the basically like the free time to go back to your notes and say, oh yeah, 8 months ago there was another case just like Carl Luter's with another client. And I think just like developing a kind of institutional memory about this stuff is important. Anyway, who else wants to talk? Who wants to talk about like what is working or what is not working in terms of moral distress on their team? Feel free to unmute.
Well, I just wanted to mention to you that in the state budget this year, there is a proposal for, or in the governor's budget, there's funding for the state share so that CSP would be funded for counties. So what that would mean is that counties could implement CSP fully with full reimbursement.
Huh?
So that would happen. And also there's also in the budget is that ACT would be implemented, full ACT teams.
Well, I think that's great. You know, my sense is that CSPs in the state are kind of like ACT. I mean, for many years they kind of took the place of ACT teams. But you know, the irony here, by the way, is that ACT was invented in Madison, Wisconsin, right? Sort of community treatment, which is now all over the world. I mean, many countries
except here.
Except here, right. I don't quite know how that happened. But no, as I said there at the very start of this training, I think these are very good programs. I mean, and ACT in particular is probably the best researched outpatient health program, mental health program in the world. Right, so much research has been done on it. So I believe in ACT and I believe in CSPs. That's why I hate it when I hate to hear the story. I mean, I'm very bothered when I hear stories about, you know, as we said, even here in the chat, you know, people getting burnt out and not having a safe workspace to talk about these things. Because the model itself does work. I mean, it works as good as anything else does right now. Interesting. Well, it's 3:28. Let me just take this time to thank you all for your attention. I really appreciate your attendance in this training. I hope it's been of some help. I very much appreciate your feedback. You have, in fact, I'll put it on. You have my, here's my email. Oops.
Paul, while you're pulling up your email, I just want to say thank you for a stellar presentation for our change agents. You know, many change agents have been asking for this particular topic, and thank you again for speaking for us. It was a wonderful presentation. Thank you so much, Paul.
Thank you, Amy, and I'll just hang out until you until you close it off.
Sounds good. There might be another person with a question.
Yeah.
Thank you, Paul.
Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. It's great to see you again.
Yeah, long time.
It has been a while. Come back to a steering committee meeting if you like.
Well, if I have anything, if you want me to add anything, I will. Sure, yeah.
We were just talking about turnover rates in our agencies, and then as we were going through this presentation today, I'm like, oh my God, we need Paul to have this discussion with us too.
I'm happy to help out in any way I can, you know, as you know.
I'll talk to Jen about it because we were just talking about this about possibly making this a whole theme for 2024 for the MC3 change agents, because it is thick out there with just, you know, everybody getting burnt out and the turnover rate and the just, you know, this kind of agency hopping and yeah.
Yeah, right. No, it's a real problem, and I know that continuity of care is so crucial. You know, relationships heal. I've seen relationships between, you know, clients and case managers just be so therapeutic, and people even who are not necessarily trained therapists, right? So I don't, you know, I'm not a snob at all about this. You know, someone with a bachelor's degree can strike up a relationship with a client over a period of years, and that relationship heals the person. And when you have burnout and agency hopping, that all just goes into the toilet. It's a real.
Yep.
So yeah, no, I'm very happy to carry on a conversation, and as just like I said, I have the free time basically, and even though I don't have that much free time, but I'm happy to take open up my schedule and and help you guys out if it's a question of training is about burnout, more training is about moral distress. I'm happy to help out in any way that you want to plug me in.
Well, wonderful, Paul. Thank you for that.
Oh, by the way, Amy, while you're on the line, or while you're still present, can you send me the link to the recording? Because I may want to use this recording and listen to myself and make changes or whatever.
In fact, thank you for that, because